All right. Hey, well, good morning, Wildlife. Excited to see you guys. Excited to be here. Are you guys ready to go? Yeah. Hey, who was outside playing 9 Square earlier, totally getting destroyed by Ryan? Yeah, that's right. Hey, if you haven't played 9 Square yet, it's going to be here next weekend as well. It's outside. It's an awesome game, and it's so easy. Even I can play it, all right? Hey, well, I'm excited to be with you guys on this Sunday morning. If you and I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Johnny, and I'm on staff here in Wildlife, and what we're about to do is we're about to head into what we call a time of teaching. So this is what we call the most important time of our Sunday morning. So a great way to follow along is with what we call a message note sheet. It looks just like this. Should have been under your chair. Why don't you grab one, wave it above your head so we know you have one. Awesome. This is a great way to follow along. If you notice on the front and the back, there's some fill in the blanks. That is a great tool to help you follow along as we head into this time. Throughout this time, the fill-ins are going to be on the screens behind me, so use that as a great tool. We often say, hey, it's not a test, it's not a quiz. We're not trying to trick you in any way. It's a great opportunity and a great way for us all to pursue God together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pray for us. But if it's your first time, if it's your second time, if you are one of our new friends from Tournament Series, we are so excited that you guys are here. And man, I'm so excited to wrap up Tournament Series this Wednesday. We're going to be watching a movie. We'll have popcorn, soda. It's going to be an awesome time. If you're like, Johnny, what movie are we watching? You'll have to figure it out this Wednesday. You'll find out then, all right? Hey, so as we jump into this time, let's go ahead and pray. If you're brand new, this is an important time. So all we ask is that you respect it. Meaning, don't be talking to people around you. Don't be on your phone during this time. If you need anything at all, you're like, Johnny, I have to go to the bathroom again. Whoa, that's crazy. If you need anything, find someone with a volunteer staff badge, just looks like this. They'll help you out. Listen to them. If they say, hey, put that down, don't do that, whatever, stop lighting that person on fire, listen to them, all right? They matter a lot, and you got to respect them, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and pray. We're going to jump right into this time. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much, man, for this time that we get to be here. What a beautiful opportunity as we open up your word to see these stories that actually happened and how you are the main central theme throughout all of it. So Jesus, as we go into this time, would you really just reveal more of who you are? Show us how awesome and epic you are. As we are in this moment, I just pray for myself that I would become so much less. Would my words not be my own? Would you be speaking through me so that we can see you as our King and as our ruler? So Jesus, we love you, and it's in your name. We all said, amen. All right, question for you. What is the longest thing you've ever had to wait for in your entire life? And I would love for you to respond. So raise your hand. What's the longest thing? Was it a ride at Disneyland? Was it the In-N-Out drive-thru? Was it Chick-fil-A being backed up? You know, like, what is the longest thing you've ever had to wait for something? Camila, what do we got? Waiting in the line for Guardians of the Galaxy. Has anyone been on Guardians of the Galaxy before? I miss Tower of Terror, but Guardians is still that good. I can relate with you on that, Camila. Let's go in the back. Tell everyone your name loud and proud. Chloe. Everyone, let's give it up for Chloe. Chloe, what do we got? What's the longest thing you've ever had to wait for? Waiting for what? Oh, yeah. How long are we talking? Whoa. The bar is so low. Let's get someone on this side. Owen, what do we got?
Waiting for the time when we're gonna get chicks.
Oh, for you got chicken. They got chickens at home, which is awesome. You get some eggs.
No, not eggs.
Wait, is that why? Are you gonna eat these chickens? Are you? Oh no, sorry. Ew, chickens are gross. Don't go to Chick-fil-A. Eat more beef. All right, Lan, last one. What do we got? We love politics. Go ahead. Uh-huh. Okay. How is that political? We don't need to get into it. Yeah. We love everyone. Yeah, totally. Waiting in line is political. I don't know. Anyway, I love that. Hey, if you were to ask me, Johnny, what's like the longest thing you've ever had to wait for? Honestly, probably, I I don't know, like Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, like sometimes, like the worst, everyone can relate on this. Like the worst thing about that ride, I love that ride. If you were to ask me what's your favorite ride at Disneyland, it would be Pirates of the Caribbean or Caribbean, whatever you want to call it. But what's a bummer is that you see it's like a 25-minute wait in your family. You get all excited and then you go and then you're waiting for like 45 minutes to an hour and you're like, I thought it was supposed to be a third. Anyway, like, let's be honest, a lot of us in this room, we get frustrated. We all probably really hate or really dislike waiting for something, especially when we don't know how long it will take. Again, waiting in line at Disneyland, waiting for summer break. Some of us 8th graders in this room, you are waiting for high school or you're dreading high school. Others of us, maybe it's waiting for your birthday, waiting for your Amazon package to arrive. And you're like, 2-day shipping. Yeah, right. And then they lose your package. Oh my gosh. We should sue. No, I'm joking. We shouldn't. But hey, let's be honest. We all get frustrated because waiting is the worst, especially when you don't know how long it will take. That can be the worst thing on earth. And I think some of us in this room, when it comes to waiting, especially when it comes to following God, we can feel just like that. That it can be so frustrating, it can be tiring waiting on God. And sometimes it can be really painful when we're waiting for God to do something. Especially maybe for you, you're doing the right thing. You're trying to follow Jesus. You're reading your Bible. You're coming to Wildlife. You're in a life group. You're sharing open and honestly in your group. And that's exactly where we find ourselves in Joseph's story this morning. You see, we've been in this series called Plot Twist, where we've been looking at the life of Joseph. Now, if you're not familiar with Joseph, Joseph is a character found in the very first book of the Bible known as Genesis. And Joseph's story is full of plot twists and turns. If you've been with us over the last couple of weeks, you'll remember that a plot twist is when the story takes an unexpected turn. When you find out in the 5th Star Wars movie that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad, and you're like, whoa, he's killed a lot of people. Like, that is a huge plot twist, something that no one saw coming. And hear me, we love a good plot twist when it comes to a movie, a TV show. You're like, wow, this show is ending terribly. Like, Stranger Things, it's terrible. Anyway, like you're just so surprised. But when it comes to our own lives, when it comes to a plot twist in our own lives, we hate it because we don't like to be uncomfortable. We like to know exactly what's going on. At least I do. I love a plan, and I want to know exactly what's going to happen in the right way at the right time. But when it comes to Joseph's story, man, it has a lot of plot twists and turns. If you were with us week 1, we looked at that Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. Some of us, we might have felt betrayed by a brother or sister or maybe a good friend. Joseph's betrayal is so much worse than that. If you remember a few weeks ago, we looked at that Joseph was his dad's favorite. We don't have time to get into that. But his 11 brothers were jealous of Joseph, so much so, no, they didn't tie his shoelaces together or his sandals together so that he would fall over. They threw him in a pit, a well, hopefully that they would see him die. And they're like, you know what, that's too extreme. So let's sell him into slavery. Like, whoa, what a big plot twist. And we see in Joseph's story in week 2 that he finds himself second in command of the palace guard, right under Potiphar, who was the palace guard of Pharaoh. And we see that Potiphar's wife was trying to tempt Joseph and to do something that he shouldn't have. And what we saw that Joseph's story, he led with integrity. He was doing the right thing even though no one else was around, and he chose to do integrity even when it would cost him something. And that something threw him into prison, even though he was doing the right thing. Now, this morning, we're going to continue Joseph's story, and we're going to see that he is now in prison. And we're going to see that Joseph's story is going to take probably the biggest plot twist ever. So if you have a Bible with you, we're going to be opening it up to Genesis chapter 41, and we're going to be starting in verse 1. Now, if you have a Bible with you, Genesis is in the first book of the Bible. And if you're like, I don't know where that is, just turn a couple of pages. You'll be right there. If you've gotten to the Psalms or Revelation, you've gone way too far. All right. So Genesis chapter 41, and we're going to be starting in verse 1. And as you guys are turning there, I want to quickly give us some context to understand more of what the bigger story of what's going on. So, if you remember last week, Joseph chose integrity. He chose to do the right thing, even though it cost him something. And that something is that he was thrown into prison. And we find himself in prison with two other prisoners, a cupbearer and the baker. Now, this cupbearer was the cupbearer of Pharaoh. He had a high responsibility, and he found himself in prison. And the cupbearer and this baker both had these amazing yet weird dreams. And if you remember, Joseph can interpret these dreams because God's given him this gift to interpret dreams. So these two people come to Joseph in prison, and they're like, we've had these dreams. What do they mean? And Joseph interprets these dreams. And what ends up happening is that the cupbearer is now restored to this position of being the cupbearer for Pharaoh, and the other guy dies, but we don't have time to get into that. But this cupbearer is restored, and the one thing Joseph asked in return from the cupbearer is like, hey, would you not forget about me? When you go back to Pharaoh, would you tell Pharaoh of me so that I can get out of here? Like all of us in this room, we would probably do something very similar to someone high in the authority and in charge. We would ask this person, hey, would you make sure you tell Pharaoh to remember me? But here's the thing. This cupbearer totally forgets Joseph. So much so, 2 more years passed, and that's where we pick up in this story. So Genesis chapter 41, and we'll be starting in verse 1. So when 2 full years had passed, so Joseph was already in prison, and now 2 more years in prison, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. When the cows were ugly, and gaunt, ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows, and then Pharaoh woke up. What a weird dream. Have you ever had like a dream before that you wake up, you're like, whoa, that's the weirdest thing. Have you ever had a dream where you're just falling? Yeah. What's that about? Anyway. And then you like fall out of your bed. Anyway. It hurts. You're on a bunk bed. Anyway. How'd you break your arm? I had a dream. Anyway. Verse 5. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up by the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. So notice, he's had 2 dreams similar, right? Like this number 7, something about that 7 is going to matter that we'll figure out later on. So verse 8, in the morning, his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. So clearly these dreams are troubling him. He's really upset because he's like, these mean something. These are very weird dreams. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcomings. So he immediately remembers his promise to Joseph in prison. Pharaoh was once again angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain's guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. So the cupbearer is sharing a little bit of his story about what Joseph did, and he's about to share a little bit more. Each of us had a dream the same night. Each dream had a meaning of its own. Now, a young Hebrew was there, a servant of the captain's guard. If you remember, again, Potiphar, that's the captain's guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them. I was restored to my position, and then the other man was impaled. He died. Anyway, so Pharaoh, we don't have time to get into that. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I heard it was said that that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. So Pharaoh hears about Joseph's reputation. He's like, hey, I hear you can interpret dreams. I've had some weird dreams. Here are my dreams. What can you tell me about them? But I love Joseph's response. He says, I can't do this. if I was Pharaoh, I'd be like, what do you mean you can't do this? But then Joseph says, he replied, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So what I love is Joseph reminds everyone, us reading these, but it also reminds Pharaoh, like, hey, I can't do this. Only God can interpret these dreams. Now, we're going to jump down to verse 39, but as we jump down, we just don't have time to continue reading the majority of this chapter. So I'll just quickly summarize it. Basically, Joseph interprets these dreams. He's basically saying, like, hey, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 years of prosperity where all of your livestock, like everything's going to be awesome. And you're going to get so many great things for your entire nation for these 7 years. But then these other 7 years, you're going to have 7 years of famine, where your entire nation, everything around you is going to die, and you are going to be without of a lot of resources. So Pharaoh hears this, and he goes, that sounds terrible. He's like, well, then what do you propose we do? So Joseph comes up with this amazing idea of like, hey, for the 7 good years, why don't you store all of these good things away so that you have them for this later time, so that when the 7 years of famine show up, you're not going to die and be without food, not just you, but the entire nation of Israel. So Pharaoh hears this and he says, this is amazing advice. Clearly, this wisdom you have is not you. This is clearly the God you are talking about, that God has given Joseph this wisdom. So what does Pharaoh do? Pharaoh gives him a huge promotion. Let's jump down to verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning and as wise as you. What a compliment, by the way. Like, that's really awesome. Verse 40, you shall be now in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I here put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Now we're going to pause right there. But man, what a huge promotion. If you see here, Joseph goes from prison, the dungeon, the bottom of the bottom, all to second in command of Egypt. Like, this is even a bigger promotion than he had before with Potiphar. He is now basically like the vice president of all of Egypt. That is a huge deal. But what I want to focus on in this time is, if you notice, Joseph had to wait a long time. He waited 2 more years after the cupbearer promised that he would tell Pharaoh of Joseph. But he had to wait 2 more years. So what I want to do is to kind of talk about patience and waiting. And again, in a room this size, a lot of us probably really get frustrated when we have to wait for something, especially when we don't know how long it will take. So here's our first fill-in. This is what we call the big thing on your note sheet. If you're brand new to wildlife, basically is that if we were all up in like an airplane and we were to look down and we would see like this like gigantic San Fernando Valley, Simi Valley, like we're looking at like this big thing. What is this passage talking about when it comes to what God's trying to show us? Here's the big thing. God's timing is perfect even when it feels slow. God's timing is perfect even when it feels slow. Now, in a room this size, man, for those of us that love Jesus, we are following Jesus, you would say that you are a Christian, a Christ follower. You are trying to become more like Jesus every single day. Yeah, you scrape your knee once in a while, but God's grace picks you back up. If that's you and you see this, you probably have related with this in one stage or another. Like, God's timing is perfect. His way is always better, even when it feels like he's taking forever, even when it feels slow. And Joseph's story teaches us something really important, that just because life feels slow doesn't mean God stopped working. All right. So what we're going to do with the rest of our time is we're going to unpack this further with 3 key points. So your first fill-in is this. Let's unpack the big thing. Number 1 is this. Waiting doesn't mean God stopped working. Waiting doesn't mean God stopped working. That for Joseph in his story, we see that he interpreted dreams. He was always trying to do the right thing, even when it would cost him something. The cupbearer was restored, yet Joseph was forgotten for 2 more years in prison. That sucks. Let's be honest. Like, that is a hard thing to be a part of. But Joseph in prison, he was probably asking this question, God, did you forget about me? Like, God, what the heck? Like, you promised all this stuff, but here I am in prison. Like, what is going on? And I'm sure as he was wrestling with this, he was probably feeling like God is quiet. Maybe God has forgotten him and he's wrestling with this. But what we need to understand is that waiting doesn't mean God stopped working. Waiting doesn't mean God forgot about you. And just because God feels quiet, just because he feels silent to you, doesn't mean God forgot about you, but especially doesn't mean God stopped working in your story. Even Joseph couldn't see what was going on. But what I love about Joseph's integrity to do the right thing, even though it cost him something, he was still trying to follow God, even in the midst of all of this chaos, even in the midst of prison. God was still moving his story forward. But let's talk about it when it comes to our middle school lives, right? For all of us in this room, we are in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. And when it comes to middle school, a lot of us can be really frustrated when it comes to waiting. That maybe for you, you've wrestled with like, man, I just can't wait till middle school's over. Or I just can't wait till I go to the next grade. Or I can't just wait till I get out of this class at school. And we struggle with that because we feel like waiting is hard. Maybe for others of us, we ask the question like, will I ever make the team at school? Or will I ever be noticed? Will I ever be seen by other people? The things at home, are those things ever going to change? Others of us, maybe we're asking, will I ever find a relationship? Will I ever be in a relationship one day? And there's so many things in our lives that we struggle with, that we wrestle with when it comes to waiting. That for some of us, waiting 30 minutes is a long time. Waiting 2 hours for a line at Disneyland is a long time. But those things aren't always as serious as some other stuff in our lives. Maybe it's waiting for us to find friends at school, and you're like, what the heck? It's taking weeks, months, if not years to find friends at school. And this oftentimes can be really frustrating for a lot of us in here. But as we look at Joseph's story, just because you're waiting doesn't mean God isn't working in your story. Like, Wildlife, hear me. Waiting is hard sometimes. It can be frustrating. So my encouragement and challenge to you is like, keep waiting. Whatever God's doing in your life right now, whatever season you find yourself in, whether it's really hard, like home life is really like stressful right now. Like there's yelling all the time, whatever it is. Keep waiting, keep pressing in to Jesus. He is faithful, meaning that you can trust Jesus. All right. And we'll talk more about that later on. So that's number one. Waiting doesn't mean God stopped working. Number two is this: God prepares you in the waiting. God prepares you in the waiting. Though what we see in this life of Joseph up to this moment is that Joseph has been waiting and has been preparing for 13 years of his life. If you remember, he was sold by his brothers into slavery when he was 17. And then he found himself with this huge promotion by being second in command of all of Egypt. Again, like the vice president of Egypt, so to speak. And that was when he was 30. 13 years, give or take. That is a long time of waiting. But in this waiting, he learned a lot. He learned, obviously, patience. He learned leadership, faithfulness. He learned humility. He learned so much wisdom by pressing into God rather than running away from God. Like, this is a lot of great things that Joseph learned while he was waiting. And this prison that Joseph found himself in wasn't pointless. It was preparation for what God was doing in his story. Now, for some of us in this room, when it comes to middle school, we don't understand why we have to do math class, or like we don't understand why we have to be in history. Like that is so in the past. Like a lot of us in this room, we might find ourselves in certain classes at school that we think are pointless. And sometimes we go, especially when we get to high school and we do geometry, you're like, I don't understand. Like, this is my story. I don't understand it. Like, yeah, no, not the game, not geometry dash. All right. Like the class. Wow. Well, you have a big awakening. There's this class in high school called geometry. You're not playing on a phone the whole time. You're like, I don't care about the radius. Isn't this the radius? I don't understand. But anyway, like I remember when I was in high school, man, I did not care about geometry class. I didn't care about it. One, I wasn't good at it, but I always just was wrestling with like, what's the point of this? I'm never going to use this. And that's true, but that's not the point. The point is there are so many situations in our lives where we think it's pointless. Why are we doing it? Maybe for some of us in this room, it's a group project. Who loves a good group project? 3 of us. Awesome. Who doesn't like group projects in this room? Yeah, that's probably because you were the one that was left with the group project. Anyway, but like, let's be honest, if you love group projects, that's great. For those of us like myself that don't love group projects, it can be hard working with people. And you might be thinking, what's the point? Why am I working with all of these people? Maybe we need to have what we call like a shift in perspective to understand like maybe God's doing something in your life, in your story, that maybe God's teaching you how to work with people. Or maybe there's chores at home. Maybe it's taking out the trash, feeding your dog, doing the dishes after dinner. Maybe it's cleaning up your room every day, every week, or once a year. Like maybe for you, it's doing chores at home. And maybe for you, you honestly feel like it's pointless. It's like, what's the point of doing dishes? Like, they're just going to get dirty again. Like, what's the point of making my bed? I'm just going to sleep in the bed again. Like, what's the point? Maybe God is teaching you responsibility by doing all these things at home. Or maybe for you, it's not making the team. Maybe God's trying to teach you and show you, hey, don't give up, don't quit. Maybe it's being in a class you really don't like. Maybe for you, you swear your teacher's Satan and you just don't like this class at all. And you're like, when am I going to be out of geometry class? When is this going to happen? Maybe God is trying to teach you discipline. Maybe he's trying to teach you to do the right thing, even though it's really, really hard. Here's the thing. God is preparing you even when it feels pointless. So instead of going, this is stupid, why are we doing this? I would encourage you, maybe talk with a life group leader, a leader in this room, and start sharing what's going on. Be like, I feel like this class at school, or I feel like these chores at home that my parents are having me do, like, I really feel like it's pointless. Like, what is going on? And maybe your leaders can help you bring more perspective of like, well, maybe God's trying to show you this or trying to help you in this way. I guarantee you, Joseph, in these years he found himself in prison, there probably was a moment where he was just like, this is pointless. What is going on? God, what are you doing? But as we see, the waiting paid off. And just because we wait for something doesn't mean we're going to get good things in our lives. Maybe God is trying to show us something that, hey, do you trust me despite whatever goes on in your story? So God's preparing you even when it feels pointless. Number 3, and then we'll wrap this up. Number 3 is this, is that God's timing can change everything in a moment. God's timing can change everything in a moment. Remember this story, Joseph was in prison. Out of nowhere, boom, now he's second in command of all of Egypt. That is insane. Everything in his story, in his life, changed in an instant. And honestly, that's probably the biggest plot twist so far in this entire story. He was bottom of the barrel. Like no one knew who he was. And now everyone knows who he is. Not because he earned it or deserved it, because God's faithful and God provided these things for him. That this time, this preparation, like we were talking about earlier, God, I believe, is working on Joseph's character. And what we talked about earlier last week is that character is who you are at your core. We talked about how integrity is the biggest part of your character, to do the right thing even when it may cost you something. I believe Joseph, his character was being worked on. Now, when it comes to middle school, for some of us in this room, man, life's hard. Life is difficult. And like what we look in Joseph's story, like, man, life can change in an instant if we remain faithful to Jesus. Not that Jesus is always going to reward us with what we think he should reward us with, but he's going to provide things for us that, man, totally blows our mind. That maybe for you, you struggle with depression right now. And depression is one of those things where you just feel sad all the time. And you're like, joy, never heard of it. Like, it's just so foreign to you. But you know that Jesus is faithful, so you're going to press into Jesus and you're going to trust him. You're going to wrestle with him. Maybe you get a little frustrated and mad at Jesus sometimes. Like, hear me, he can handle it. Maybe you're wrestling, you're talking with a leader, and you're just going to keep pressing into Jesus. And you're like, Jesus, why am I depressed all the time? Like, I have these thoughts that I know are bad. Like, what is going on? But then maybe one day, and hear me, I know this because I have friends in my life that joy is now what their life is known for, whereas maybe depression and anxiety is what it used to be known for. But Jesus radically changed their life, radically changed their story, not because they did anything crazy, they just followed Jesus. They wrestled with Jesus. They asked good questions. They read their Bible. They prayed to him. They journaled. They come to Wildlife. They come here on Wednesdays for life group. Like, they were just pursuing Jesus. They're serving. And then out of nowhere, they find themselves not depressed anymore, not because they took some like magical like pill or anything like that, just because now Jesus is part of their story and they get to pursue him. And Jesus, when we pursue him, man, he brings joy in our lives, joy that we can't even imagine. And hear me, joy is very different than being happy all the time. Joy is something that even when life gets crazy, even when life doesn't make sense, joy never leaves. Happiness is temporary. Joy is permanent. So, as the band comes up, this is what I want you to catch. Just because God feels slow doesn't mean God's late. Whatever's going on in your life, whatever's going on in your story, just because God feels slow, like, God, what is going on, doesn't mean God's late. And sometimes in our life, we might ask Jesus, why are you doing this? What is going on? You know, there's this prophet, there's this book in the Old Testament known as Habakkuk, which is a very fun name to say, Habakkuk. Try that, 1, 2, 3, Habakkuk. It's a fun name to say. There's this prophet in the Old Testament, Habakkuk, and there's a lot of stuff going on in his story. And basically, he goes before God, and so many things are going on, like chaos. And he goes to God, and he's like, God, what is going on? Why is this happening? What's going on over there? And what I love is God doesn't respond with, here's the answer. I love how God responds. He says, Habakkuk, if I told you what I was up to, you wouldn't believe me. And I think that's true for a lot of us in our story, that in our lives, when life's going crazy, when it's chaotic, we go to God, we're like, God, what's going on? And we think God should just give us the answer. But I think if God just gives us the answer, kind of like a genie, like, here it is, well, then we don't get to learn anything. We're not prepared for anything. God is using whatever's going on right now in your life for your own good. Even when it may not feel like that right now, he is, because that's what the Bible shares. And in Wildlife, we believe the Bible is true no matter what. Even when we're like, I disagree, it's okay to disagree, but it's still true. So here's our action step. How can we live this out this week? Here's your fill-in. Learn to trust God in the waiting. Learn to trust God in the waiting. All of us in this room, we struggle with waiting. We struggle with patience, whether it's really big or really small. Like, I get frustrated when Starbucks takes 2 more minutes for my order. Like, what are you doing? 2 minutes is nothing. I need to calm down. I know. But we struggle with being patient. We struggle with waiting sometimes. Here's what I want us to do. Learn to trust God in the waiting. Here's a couple of examples. Number 1, you just keep coming to Wildlife. Keep coming to church. Learn together how we can trust God in the waiting. Others of us, keep talking to God. Talking to God is so good for you because it's meaning you are building a relationship with God. That when we talk to God, God responds, whether it's through other people, whether it's through his word, whether it's through creation. We believe here in Wildlife that God speaks to us. Maybe others of us, we're going to keep doing the right thing even when it's hard. We're going to keep showing up even when it may cost us something. We're going to keep choosing to be kind to other people. Like, hear me, kindness isn't just for like little kids. Kindness is for all of us. And being kind can be really hard, especially when God asks us to be kind to people like our bullies or people that we don't like at school. That can be challenging. But ultimately, keep trusting God no matter what. And that's what Joseph did. Joseph didn't lose sight of what God called him to. Even in the several years of waiting, he still trusted that Jesus is good. He still trusts that God is for him, not against him. So we're going to go into this last song called Waymaker. And this song is really talking about how God provides us a way. Even when life gets crazy, even when there is a storm in our life, even when we find ourselves in a pit, even when we find ourselves in a palace, so to speak, like life's going really well, even especially when we feel like we are in a prison and we feel like there is no way out. God always provides a way for those that love him and for those that choose to follow him. So let's go ahead and let's pray. So Jesus, thank you so much for this time. We're incredibly grateful that we get to be here. We're thankful that even in the waiting, we get to trust you, we get to choose you. So Jesus, as we go into this last song of worship, would we take it seriously? Would we reflect? Would we look at these words and just ask ourselves the question, what could this mean? So Jesus, we love you. It's in your name. Amen. Yeah, I'm going to invite you guys to stand on up. Don't put the Bibles back if you borrowed one. I'm going to invite you just to stand on up, and we're going to go in this last song of worship.